Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of iTie, which is Indie Time Interview Edition. I am Ninja Guy X, and if you guys are wondering what iTie is, and you're wondering, hey, why do I want to watch this show? It's just another interview show. Well, guys, there's one simple thing that is very different from other shows, and it is that I wear a tie. And today, I am wearing my green tie with controllers. So hopefully you enjoy this tie. And but yeah, let's jump into the main event. I haven't been doing any interviews in quite some time. I took a nice long break, but it's time to come back and do an exciting interview. And it's one that I'm excited about because it's actually a game that I've played a demo and really looking forward to. Now, before we announce our main host, our main guest host, let me say hello to the chat. We've got John who says hello. We've got Dead Life says almost iTie time. Got Miss Phoenix with a nice hello here. We've got Granite T-Rock. I talk, I time. Well, I mean, I might change the name at some point, but I don't think that's what it's gonna be. We got Four Scars again. Got some nice people. Is Ninja Guy X checkmate? Well, we might know that later on, but not in this stream. You got distracted by the kitten. Oh, you guys, stop it. And then I got Dead Live. I guess you blocked the check. Oh my gosh, you guys. And then Dead Live says, good thing this chat is digital. I wouldn't want to leave a paper trail showing that I'm here. Well, it's work time. Huh? Good play of word there. Dead Alive. Oh man, you guys are awesome. Then we got Cherry Sun. Welcome to the stream, my friend. And this might be your first iTie show, so I hope that you enjoy. You too, Miss Phoenix. I hope that you guys enjoy. Alright guys, without further ado, let me introduce you to our guest today, which is Henry Hoffman, who is the CEO of Newfangled Game and also one of the main developer of Paper Trail. Welcome, my friend. How are you doing?
Hello, yeah, great to be here. Thanks very much for having me on. I'm doing great. Busy working on Paper Trail, as you know. But yeah, it's great to hang out and take a break from game development.
Awesome. Yeah, I just gotta mention, thank you so much for taking your time today to do the interview. As you mentioned, I know you're very busy. The release of the game is just around the corner. Lots of exciting stuff happening, a lot of development, lots of new stuff being added in the game. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And hopefully a lot of people, a lot of fans will learn more about the game. And
Cool.
we'll see how it is. So let's go ahead and start with a few questions. And first of all, can you introduce yourself for those who don't know you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Henry Hoffman, and as you said, I'm the CEO of Newfangled Games, but I don't really like the term CEO, I guess, because I consider myself like a game designer. So I've been making indie games for 15 years or so. The last game that I made was an indie game called Hue, which is like a side-scrolling puzzle platformer, which came out on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC and Switch and a bunch of other platforms. And that did quite well and made a bit of a name for myself off the back of that. But my jam has always been like coming up with interesting game mechanics and building out entire game experiences out of that. So with Hue, it was like, oh, you can change the background color of the world, and then things visibly disappear. But what happens if they physically disappear, and how can I explore that as a game mechanic? With Paper Trail, it's very much just like, oh, we drew a level on a piece of paper and we folded it over, and if there's a level on the front, a level on the back, then when you folded it, those two kind of levels merged, and then it created like this interesting new level. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting game mechanic. So how can I explore that? So my background has always been like game mechanic design, I guess you could say, and like indie game development. And on this project, I'm kind of mainly doing like high level game design and coming up with all the game mechanics. I'm designing all the levels as well, but then also doing a bit of everything as you do as an indie game developer. So I'm doing like all the audio design at the moment and all the character art and lots of bad game development, which my actual good programmer comes in and then fixes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at and what I'm doing at the moment.
I like this. I like how you explain how you do everything. I like that. So you mentioned Hue, and Hue is a game that I've heard of before. I've actually never played it, but it definitely gained some popularity back then because I do remember the name, and I remember like the graphics of how it looked like, and it was a very interesting concept. The game that it reminds me of the most is Runbow for some reason. I'm sure you've heard of Runbow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They've got the same sort of mechanic actually. I wasn't aware of Rumbo at the time. I think it came out when we were midway into development. And this happens with nearly every game that I work on now. It's like a traumatic experience when you're midway into making a game and you're like, yes, I've got this interesting game mechanic that's never been done before. And then another game gets released or like gets announced and it's using a similar mechanic. Luckily for that, it was like more of it was like a speed running style platformer as opposed to like a puzzle platformer. So yeah, it wasn't a huge amount of overlap there, which was fortunate for us. But it was similar with Paper Trail actually, because yeah. So I've been working on like the core mechanic and the prototype for about a year, like secretly, and I went to a conference in Berlin, and I was talking to some other game developers, and I was pitching it to them basically, and they were like, oh yeah, I know that game. I saw it at GDC, and I was like, we never showed that at the GDC. So then I Googled it and I looked up, and there was a game called A Fold Apart, which was showcased at the experimental gameplay workshop at GDC, and it's using a similar paper folding mechanic. And I was like, no! And I nearly stopped working on the game because I was like, the entire thing that was like interesting, especially at where I was at that point in development, which was really early, was like the core mechanic. And if the core mechanic has been done, like what is there left? But luckily, their game was like a side-scrolling puzzle platformer, and ours is like a top-down puzzle adventure game. So genre-wise, it was very different. And then just that shift in perspective from side on to top down creates like completely different puzzles and a completely different game feel. So luckily, like I hadn't completely sabotaged our game without realizing by stealing the same mechanic. So they worked out all right.
That's good. Well, if you guys do enjoy Paper Trail, you can always go and they're probably going to go well side by side. So I mean, it's a good game to check out. Fold Apart if you want to check it out. I'm definitely going to check it out because I'm kind of curious about it now. But guys, yeah. Also, if you're interested for Hue, like Henry mentioned, it's just available everywhere. So check it out. It's a good way to support the developers, and definitely give it a look. Also, if you want to give a big support to the developer right now, if you can wishlist their game on Steam, that would be awesome. I've got the link in the description below, and also the link to the Newfangled, the developer team Twitter inside the description, so check it out. So Henry, let's go a little bit into your personal life. So you mentioned that you've been a developer for 15 years, but where did it all start? So, how did you start gaming up until when you decided to create video games and such?
Yeah, sure. So, like, as a kid, I grew up in kind of a bit of a technophobic family, so there was no real technology, no real computers or anything like that. So as a kid growing up, I think we had like a black and white TV with a twizzly knob, and then we had no like game consoles and no home computer or anything until I was about 9 years old. When I was nine, we got like a family computer, and that was kind of my first real introduction into gaming. I think with the family computer, I got a copy of Tomb Raider 3 and Driver.
Nice,
I
good
think that was
games.
it. And then yeah, and I had like a force feedback steering wheel. It was cool. And
Wow.
then yeah, so then I got into playing games with that, but I was really bad at these games, right? So Driver, for example, there's like this training area in a car park at the beginning,
Yeah.
which is like a tutorial, but I couldn't complete it, so I couldn't ever play the full game because I was just stuck on the tutorial. So I really struggled with that. But what I did love doing is I loved going into the game and kind of hacking apart the files that made the game. So I'd change like the INI files in order to like change gravity and make everything fly all over the place, or like change the splash screen to a picture of my face, and all just like hacking around and messing up with the game. So I found that really interesting. So kind of what I realized quite early on is that I preferred like messing around with games because I was so bad at playing them than I did with actually playing them. So what happened is when I was about nine, just after we got the family computer, I got this copy of a magazine called Planet PC, which came with a tool called Click and Play, which was a drag and drop game making tool. And yeah, I became obsessed with it. And between the ages of like 9 and 12, I made over 100 different 2D games just using this drag and drop tool, just for fun. And and then when I was about 12, or yeah, I think must have been about 12, I then got the same magazine with a copy of Blender on it. And at the
Mm.
time, so Blender's a piece of 3D software. You can still get it today. It's an amazing open source project. But at the time, it came with an integrated game engine and a drag and drop scripting tool. So I started building 3D games. And the first 3D game I built was a game called Minibus Stunt Rally, which was like a minibus stunt driving game, basically, because my dad loved minibuses or something. So I thought it would be a fun gift for him. And then, yeah, between the ages of like 13 and 16, I made hundreds and hundreds of like 3D games, like first person shooters, like random flying games, like all sorts of random stuff, basically. So I think I knew at that point that I was gonna kind of go to university, study, and like learn how to make video games properly. Yeah, and that's kind of how I got into it. I ended up going to university in Wales, the University of Wales, Newport, and studying video game design. Started a company in my first year there of university, and then
Wow.
ever since then have been making indie games professionally, really.
It's crazy. Like it's as if since 9 years old, you were already building up to be what you are now. So that's incredible. Now, I want to see your next game to be like a compilation of all the 100 games you've made, and I bet this is gonna do well. You know, I bet people will buy it. They'd be like,
Yeah,
this is the newfangled game I was looking for. You know, so.
I would love to revisit some of those games. Unfortunately, like when I was about 18, I had a hard drive fire. I think it was 19, had a hard drive fire, and I lost everything. I lost every single game and animation that I'd worked on through my childhood,
Man.
which was gutting. But I'd love to go back and see what some of those games are. I actually found a folder randomly, and I printed off some screenshots from those old games, and that's like the only record I have.
Oh man, that's unfortunate. I know someone who actually recovers failed hard drive, but back
Oh
then,
yeah,
right? Like it wasn't possible, so we didn't thought about it, and you
yeah,
probably threw it away. But oh man, that's unfortunate. But at least it's all in your memory, right? So maybe at some point
yeah, yeah,
you'll
yeah.
be able to revisit these ideas and bring some even more cool, puzzle type of games. I love it. Um,
Definitely.
yeah. So newfangled games. I got really curious, and I had to have these questions in my portfolio. Um, so the game the studio kind of like was called Fiddlesticks Games before, and then you changed it to Newfangled, from my understanding. So what's the history behind both companies, and why was the name changed? How did that work?
Yeah, so they're actually two different companies.
Oh,
So what
okay.
happened is I started Fiddlesticks with a guy called Dan DeRocha, who was a friend from university. And we were able to. The idea for that company was always, oh, we make a game and then like we sell the rights to it to the publisher or something like that. So it was never supposed to be like a long-term sustainable studio. It was much more about project finance and building a project. So me and him were able to get a little bit of investment for that, and we made Hue over like 3 years. And yeah, and luckily at the end of that, it was a success. So we were able to like sell the IP to the publisher. So
Nice.
Curve Digital, who was the publisher, ended up acquiring that. And me and him both walked away and are running separate companies. Now he's working on it. He's working at a game studio now, or running a game studio. What's it called? I can't remember. But they're making a game called Deathground, which is like a dinosaur survival game, which is awesome. It did really well on Kickstarter. And yeah, and I separated, and I was like, right, I've had enough of like starting up individual studios, like making a game and then moving on to the next studio. I want to build for Newfangled like a long-term sustainable studio where we make multiple games and we grow the team and we don't like lose all that talent. That's one of the things I realized working on previous games is like you would release the game, everyone would go their separate ways, and then all of those relationships and all of that internal knowledge that you've built up over that time gets lost. I didn't really want to do that again. So yeah, for Newfangled, it's much more about building a long-term sustainable indie studio and building out a team and doing something like I want each game to be more ambitious technically, but also conceptually than the previous one. And that's very difficult to do when it's just like a one-man team or a two-man team just building games and starting up new companies.
Yeah, I can understand how resetting must be, hard to redo something, very good. So now with the development team that you have, you can build up and reuse some stuff from previous knowledge. So I like that. Yeah. So speaking of which, are you able to talk a little bit about your team, like who's in the team and who are you working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started the studio probably 3 years ago, and it was just me and my brother to begin with. So Fred Hoffman, he helped me a little bit doing some art on Hue as well previously while he was at university studying illustration. But yeah, what I wanted in a co-founder was someone that was willing to like put in the extra time to make sure that we're able to like make an amazing game essentially, and not just someone that wants to do like a 9 to 5 job doing art or a contractor doing art. So I needed like a partner in crime basically, and Fred was like a great potential opportunity for that. So me and him started the studio 3 years ago. At the time, we were living in like an illegal basement flat in Brixton in South London, which was like siphoning electricity off the elevator shaft, and it was like, and it had no windows.
Oh my gosh!
And it was like totally illegal. It was like, and it was a dive. It was amazing place to start a game studio. So me and him, like, yeah, we started there, and then we were able to like in our spare time. He was doing bar work, and I was working on a VR game, I think, doing contract work. And during like that year, we put together a business plan and we like applied to investors, I think over 200 investors, and it just became like a real mission to try and start this company up. And in the end, we were able to find a great investment partner who gave us a tiny bit of seed funding, enough for us to like work, just me and him and one other person, for a year or so. So we started the studio, and then pretty soon after that, we got on board our developer. He's called Gonzalo, and he was based in Mexico City, who I knew from a friend through a friend of a friend. One of the best game developers I've ever worked with in my life. It's absolutely fantastic. But after a couple of years, we were having such a good time working with him, we decided to sponsor him to come to the UK. Wow. So now he's now in Norwich, which is where we're based now, working with us on site, which is awesome. So yeah, he's probably like, there's no way we could have built like all this folding tech and like some of the shader wizardry and dynamic mesh generation and stuff that's used in the game. Like I tried to do the folding coding myself and I failed like 5 times. So it's great having like a really good developer on board. Awesome. Yeah. So that's like the 3 core team members. And then recently, so we're also working with Claudie, who's our composer. She's doing like all the music and she's done a fantastic job putting together a soundtrack. We're really excited to be, oh no, I can't announce that yet. But yeah, there's lots of really exciting stuff coming up with the soundtrack over the next year or so. So that's going to be super exciting. And then we're working with Robert, who is like a publishing/production lead. He's based out of Tokyo. So he came on board fairly recently, and he's been great at like talking to Sony and Nintendo in Japan, but also going to like Tokyo Game Show and Bit Summit and all the big Japanese events and stuff like that. And then we've recently also brought on Kyle, who was like an intern. He started as an intern from my local university, but then he became so vital to the team that we couldn't help but to hire him. So he's now working with us as well, and that's basically the team at the moment.
That is very cool. Yeah. So you're building up a pretty nice team there. I like that, and you're pretty busy with the Bit Summit. You've been traveling to the Develop conference from in Brighton, and yeah, so it's nice, that you have a public appearance at some places. You're also taking care of some T-shirt for some reason. I don't know, the full story of that, but that's a funny one. That's a funny one.
So that's yeah. That's basically we've got some friends who are making a game called Lunar Abyss, which is like a really amazing looking game. It's like a AAA style first person shooter, which they've managed to build with like a relatively small team. But we've created a bit of a war with them publicly on Twitter. So I get like silly T-shirts printed about their game, and they've got a bunch of stuff in the works as well that they're doing about Paper Trail. So it's just funny. It started off as a joke, and now it's become like a public feud. It's really funny.
Yeah, I like that. I like how it all works out. There's a few games that I've learned about just by following you guys. You guys are good
cool.
at like just advertising games that people do and all that, and I do enjoy that. The community that you guys build up like that.
Nice.
But yeah, all right. So we're here to talk about Paper Trail. So let's go ahead and do that. So the game is coming in early 2024 with an interesting mechanic. I'm making it sound as we didn't talk about it yet, but yeah. So the main aspect of the game is that you can fold the world to advance through the puzzle of the game and the story and all of that. So it's pretty cool. I know we already kind of talked about it, but can you like talk a little bit about the game? Say what it's all about.
Yeah, sure. So it's like a top-down puzzle adventure game set in a fully foldable paper world, and the idea is that each individual level is essentially a piece of paper, and there's a level on the front and there's a level on the back, and you can fold that over, and that allows you to merge the two worlds. Which presents like loads of really interesting puzzle opportunities because it allows you to create an entirely new level by folding together like two different levels essentially. And we just sort of started exploring it as like an interesting game mechanic, and suddenly it turned into this entire game. There's tons of different game mechanics that like interoperate with the folding in really interesting ways. Here you can see like you've got different shaped pieces of paper. So yeah, tons of different like interesting opportunities that have come out of this quite a simple idea that what would happen if you could fold a level? And now it's like, oh, you've got these different shaped papers, and you've got these things that can travel across the folds, and the world on the reverse rotates when you fold a corner, and tons of interesting opportunities came out of that.
Yeah, very very exciting, and I like how basically the back of the paper, like the back of the world, is a completely different world, right? So it's so amazing what you can do with these folding mechanics. So from what we've noticed, even by looking at the trailer, the environment of the game is very artistic. Can you talk a little bit about what inspired you with the art style?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was kind of a collaboration between me and my brother. So my brother comes from like a background of like apparel and textile design. So he's done a lot of like illustration style stuff for t-shirts and pattern design for all sorts of like floral prints and things like that. And he hasn't done a huge amount of like illustration for games specifically. And kind of one thing that we always want to avoid is like games that self-reference other games in terms of like aesthetic inspiration. We're always looking at outside influence for like inspiration when it comes to games. So illustration is always a massive one for us. And one of the things that we do is when we come up with a new game is we come up with an interesting game mechanic, and then we're like, okay, how can we build contextually out from this game mechanic when it comes to devising an art style? And for this game, it made sense that everything was set on paper, everything was kind of like handmade, and everything had like this painterly aesthetic, which kind of makes sense based on the paper theme and everything else. There's a few ways that we did this. So one of the things we wanted to do is create like a contrast between the characters and the environment. The environment we wanted to feel like very watercolory and kind of hand painted, but it also had to read mechanically. So mechanically, there's essentially like walkable space and unwalkable space. So you have to have like this really clear visual contrast. Here you can see that there's like water, and then there's the ground, and that represents the walkable and the unwalkable space. So those were the two like building blocks of the aesthetic. And then in order to make it feel like more hand painted and like hand animated, you've got these characters which are like quite graphical and graphic designy. So they're like very flat vector shapes. And in order to make it feel like it was hand animated, we created this thing it's called frame step animation, where you skip frames in the animation to make it feel more like it's been hand animated. So that's one of the techniques that we employed with the characters. So all the characters are kind of wobbly and like feel like they're kind of painted, like each frame is painted by hand. And that's all fake. Like we didn't actually do that. We animated it in like a digital way, but then made it look like it was all hand animated, so that it wasn't, it wasn't super labor intensive. And those are some of the core tenets of the aesthetic. But then also we've got this interesting perspective at play. So we've got like this top-down perspective for the ground, so that all the ground reads and the illusion works when you fold the paper over and you create like a walkable path. But then if it was fully top-down, the game, it would be kind of boring aesthetically, right? Because you'd just be looking at the top of players' heads or characters' heads, and you'd be looking at the tops of buildings, and it wouldn't. And the puzzles would still work like with that aesthetic, but it wouldn't be very interesting. So we created like this hybrid perspective going on, which is where you've got like a top-down ground, but then all the characters and buildings and things like that are front-facing. And that way, the optical illusion of creating paths by folding the papers and stuff still works, but you can still see like characters' faces and buildings, and the aesthetic is much more interesting that way.
That's interesting. Yeah, to me, the angle feels like, the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, right? Like where it's just like kind of like a 45-degree angle, but it's true. Like I guess it is a top down, but with the characters like facing like that. It's interesting. I like everything you've described because so guys, if you want to follow the development of the game and learn about what they've all implemented in it, they do have a community page that you can watch on the Steam page, and they explain a lot of stuff, and that's what they did. They explained like some animation that they did. I can't really recall. I don't know if it was for a bridge or something, but the reasoning was because of the colors were too much the same, so you modified some stuff to make it sure that it was visually appealing. And I think it was like the stairs or something to make it look like it was a background of something. And then anyway, but it's always interesting stuff to read, so guys, you should really check it out if you're really interested in seeing how the art has been done in the game. Now, lately you guys have actually posted a little bit more about the music of the game, and you've even put some animation of the composer singing and stuff like that. It's pretty interesting. So can you talk a little bit about who the composer is and what kind of vision you had when you wanted to put the music in the game?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got this very specific approach when it comes to finding composers for the projects that we're working on. I did the same. I employed the same technique for Hue as I did for Paper Trail, and that is to find a piece of music that fits the vision of your game first before approaching composers. So with Hue, that's what I did. Is I like scoured the internet trying to find some like interesting, like quite minimalist piano composition stuff that fitted the style of the game, and I could put in the demo and I could tell worked. Then what I would do is find out who that composer was, approach them, and see if they'd be interested in creating the full soundtrack for the game.
Wow! Okay.
And this is exactly the same technique that we did for Paper Trail. Is that we found this piece of music that was kind of like Celtic inspired. It had like tin whistles and a lot of this, and it had a really interesting vocals, which I thought was really interesting because not many games employ vocals, especially not throughout the entire soundtrack. So I thought that could be really interesting, and it really fitted with the game when I put it into the demo. It was like, I think I built the very first prototype, and it was really before the mechanic was even working or anything, but we'd kind of established a vibe, I guess you could say, and that music really fitted with the vibe that we were going for. So I approached Claudie and asked whether she'd be interested in creating the full soundtrack. And I think she didn't really quite understand what she'd got herself into. I think she imagined that maybe it'd be like 2 or 3 months work, and we've kind of been working together over 2 years now. So it's been a lot of work. And normally in video games, when you're creating a soundtrack, what you do is, if it's quite digital, you can employ like some middleware like WYs or Fmod or something like that, which allows you to create like dynamic layering of sound. So as you play through the environment, you can kind of avoid the repetition by triggering different layers of music. But because the music that we're going for is really kind of organic, and it's using a lot of like organic instruments and organic vocals and things like that, that sort of digital approach to layering didn't work for us. So the only way around that we were able to find is like just recording really long pieces of music. So you will find that like in the game, each track for each environment is about 15 minutes long, which and usually in a game it would be about 3 minutes. So so we've got maybe 12 different tracks, I think, but all of them are like super long, long and involved. So a huge amount of work has gone into like making like a really interesting soundtrack. And all of it is vocalized, and they all use like really interesting instruments. So yeah, really excited with how the soundtrack has come together.
I love it, and that's awesome. To be honest, you're right. Like I never felt like the music was repeating. It did that. I think that when someone successfully do a loop without noticing that it's been repeated,
Yeah.
I think that that's the meaning of a successful song. Because even if when you think on the Nintendo era with Super Mario, right, the music was so entertaining that you just wouldn't notice. You would still have fun listening to the song, even after listening it over and over. So I do feel like she did an amazing job, and I do enjoy. It really fits the game well. So hats off on deciding to that piece for sure. Rebecca is asking a question in the chat. She's asking, "Did I just see that the character's name is Paige?" So that is correct, Rebecca. I think that was the most genius part of, of Henry's mind is naming the character Paige. That is awesome.
Yeah, so one thing that we don't explicitly say is that her last name is also Turner. So there's that.
Paige Turner, nice. It's funny because I had someone that I know close to me who her name was Paige Dunn, and it always made me laugh back then. And
Nice.
so maybe you can name the character Paige Dunn, but
Yeah.
I love that name though. It's awesome. But yeah, no. Now I actually have a question that I'm curious about. I don't even know myself because of that interesting mechanic. It's just something that I need to ask. So the controls are very unique, and you need to drag the corner of the world and fold it to reveal some of the new paths to advance, basically. So I can understand how it works with a mouse and with the touchscreen, because with a mouse you can just drag the corner and then fold it, and same thing with the finger, you just drag the folder, the papers. But I've recently heard that there's a demo available on PlayStation 5. And so, I'm wondering how the controls work with a PlayStation 5 controller.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a bunch of testing on that. So the PlayStation 5 controller actually has a touchpad. I don't know if you know, but it has a touchpad which has full touch support. So we did initially sort of prototype sort of touch controls using that, where you could use a trigger to grab and you can use the touchpad to kind of move a cursor. One thing that we found pretty quickly though is that touchpad is good for like one-off events. So like if you want to swipe in a menu navigation and stuff like that, but it becomes really awkward to hold because you're used to holding a controller like this. But for the touchpad, you then need to hold like with one hand like this and then use one finger like this. And it feels a bit awkward. So kind of the fallback that we had for that was just using the right analog stick to control a virtual cursor, which is kind of wiggles and feels like it's embedded in the game world. And we did a bunch of tweaks to make sure that it felt much more natural than just having like a one-to-one mapped analog stick fake virtual cursor. Some other things that we did is, so based on how fast you move it, it kind of wiggles around so it feels like it's embedded in the game world. We also then added like some snapping, so it snaps automatically to the different fold points on the paper. And additionally, we constrain it so you can never move it outside of the bounds of the active paper. So suddenly you're using an analog stick, which is by itself controlling a virtual cursor would be a little bit awkward. But we added a ton of additional improvements. So actually, because it's like snapping into position for the folds and because it's constrained to the paper, it feels really natural and organic. So whilst I do agree that probably on touchscreen, it feels like the most tactile and intuitive, it definitely works really well on a gamepad as well. And we've seen a lot of streamers actually playing the PC version using a gamepad or playing it on the Steam Deck as well, which seems to work pretty well so far.
Can you elaborate on how you made it work also with the Steam Deck? Is it going to be a similar type of mechanic?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Steam Deck was interesting. We only released a Steam Deck demo fairly recently, but it's gone down really well. We got to like the top post on the Steam Deck subreddit when we announced it, so that was super cool.
Nice.
But yeah, one of it's got the trackpads, so the Steam Deck trackpads, which are really intuitive, and it's so perfect for this game mechanic. So we're using like a hybrid approach where you use the trackpad to control this virtual cursor in the same way that you use like an analog stick. But because it's like touch based, it just feels super intuitive and natural. And then you just use the trigger in order to grab the paper. And that's definitely like the best in terms of like gamepad controls. That definitely feels the best. The Steam Deck and the trackpad.
I like that. It's going to be like a good feature to showcase the Steam Deck, right? Because I don't know a lot of games that actually use the trackpad intentionally, so it's gonna be cool. And I bet that's the kind of reception that you've got on there also. Miss
Yeah,
Miss
exactly.
Phoenix is asking. There's a PS5 demo now. Can you refresh my memory, Henry? Is the demo available publicly at the moment, or is it just in conferences?
Yeah, it's just a showcase demo, unfortunately, at the moment. So when Sony chooses to showcase their game at an event, they'll use the demo that we sent them. But yeah, we can't confirm or deny whether there will be a PlayStation demo at some point. But hopefully.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean Sony's pretty reasonable, so hopefully, yeah, we'll get something soon. Now, the game is coming out on Switch, on PlayStation, PC, mobile. Is there any platform that I'm missing? Like,
Xbox.
oh, it is coming on Xbox. Okay, so it's
Yeah.
also coming on Xbox. That is awesome. That's good to know because it basically is going to be available anywhere. There's no excuse. People who are watching right now, there's just no excuse for you to not get the game. So get to it. But yeah, so let me see here. Oh yeah, okay. So throughout the development that you did throughout the game, like I mentioned, there's a Steam community page, and you're talking about all of the development that you've made. But can you talk about some of the? We've talked a little bit about it, but can you talk a little bit about like the improvements that you've done throughout since at least this year you've done a lot of improvement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Ooh, there's so much.
Yeah, I know, right?
I think where to begin when it comes to the improvement. So there was like a demo that we released previously, and I think probably the biggest learning that we've had is like smoothing out the difficulty curve, because we've got such a wide array of gamers that want to be able to that want to play the game. Like we've got really hardcore players who absolutely love the hard levels and they want more challenging environments, and we've got like the normal players who find it difficult but like enjoy the challenge and play all the way through. And then we've got really casual players, especially with like Netflix and mobile platforms, who maybe don't really even play games and who just want to come for like the characters, for the world building, music, and they want to enjoy the story and have a chill time, but not get like frustrated and stuck on a puzzle. So like that's been a bit of a learning curve for us. I think before we were targeting like the high end difficulty audience, but now we want to be much broader in terms of audience. So one of the ways that we're doing that, we did some playtesting and we realized that a lot of the levels are too hard. So we're like fundamentally too hard. So we're ironing out that difficulty curve first of all. And then the next thing that we're working on at the moment is adding in a hint system. So, which is actually really difficult, and we're still trying to figure out exactly how that's going to work, because what my ideal hint system would be, no matter where the player had got themselves in a puzzle and no matter how obscure like they'd moved things around and got themselves into this awkward situation, that the hint system would be able to guide them out of it and then into solving the puzzle correctly. That's like my ideal best case scenario. But we've been looking into it, and like then you have to start looking into like algorithmic puzzle solvers, and it becomes very complicated. So at the moment, I'm just trying to think like, what is the best way that I can create a hint system that tells the player how a puzzle is solved step by step based on where they are, without having to use like an algorithmic puzzle solver, because that's super complex, but also being like useful to the player. So that's what I'm trying to figure out at the moment. I think that's going to be like the biggest change over the next couple of months is being able to accommodate like all those different player types. One of the things that we did as well, which the hardcore players really appreciate, I just did one of these earlier today, is we've got a collectible system, which is sort of these bits of origami that are scattered throughout the game world. I think in the public demo they're like stars, but that was always kind of placeholder. In the full game, they're going to be these pieces of origami, these origami animals that have different stories associated with them or different meanings associated with them. And what's really fun is like finding really difficult fold solutions in order to find these origami, so that like the really hardcore players, even after they've gone through and completed the game, they've still got this like hardcore challenge of finding all the origami in the game later on.
It's crazy because you wouldn't think that folding paper you would be able to do some complex puzzle, right? Like it's just I think you have like 6 different ways to fold, like 1, 2, like 8, I think 8 ways to fold, and you think, oh yeah, I'll just fold it 8 times and you can make it. But man, I got stuck on the first demo during the last part, and then in the second demo, there was some complex stuff. I really enjoyed that.
Nice.
So I'm hoping to that the game is successful, and maybe you can get like a DLC with like some really really complex puzzle. I would love that. So hopefully we
Yeah,
can make
we've
that
got
happen.
such a cache of puzzles that we've done, which we're like, this is way too hard. We could never publicly release this. So
Uh,
we've got all these like stashed away. So when it comes to it, we can yeah, if we do DLC or like a hardcore DLC, we can definitely make some of these public. Some of them
awesome.
are really hard. Some of
Yeah.
them like even they would even take me like so I got the junior designer to design a puzzle, and it would take me 30 minutes even after I knew what the solution was because it was so difficult. So.
Wow. Oh man, I would love that. Yeah, like crossing my fingers. But I understand that accessibility is key, right? So you do want all of your fans to enjoy the game. So, but yeah, like just hoping if we can get a DLC with like a slightly more difficult puzzle, I would definitely love that.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
so, there's something that I'm really, really curious about, and I haven't, like, there hasn't been a lot of talk about it, so I would love for you to explain a little bit about it. So, in the game, you guys have advertised that there's going to be, like, playable cutscenes, which we have not experienced, in the demo or anywhere. We've just seen some gifs about it and, some small sections. Can you explain a little bit about what happens during these cutscenes?
Yeah, absolutely. So the game kind of tells the story of Paige, who she kind of grows up in this village, and everyone is quite content in the village, and nobody kind of really wants to leave the village, and it's very self-contained. And something happened in your childhood that has made your parents very protective. That kind of gets explained in the cutscenes what exactly that is. So your parents are really protective, and they don't really want you to leave the village. They want you to continue like your family traditions. But one day you get a letter from, well, you get an acceptance from university, and you decide that you want bigger and better things, and you run away from home, and that kind of sets you off on this adventure. And the cutscene as you go through the world, the cutscenes are kind of explaining how you got this ability to fold the world, kind of where it came from, and kind of coming to terms with the power that you have, and also like treading your own path and finding your own way in life. And then ultimately, it turns around into reconciliation and yeah, and I don't want to say too much without spoiling
Yeah.
it, but it's a lot about the relationship with your parents, and it's about understanding your powers and your abilities, and getting outside of your comfort zone.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I'm kind of excited to try these. I'm not sure if they're easy or hard. Even if they're easy, it's just gonna be cool to be able to interact, with these and understand the story at the same time. So looking forward to play
That's
them.
the idea. The idea is that they're
Yeah.
quite easy, really, but it's much more about creating like these. Because we were like, oh, we've got this interesting technology where you can like fold the levels. What if we reuse that for the cutscenes? And it's all about like folding different images together and create and piece, and so it feels like you're kind of folding the cutscenes together yourself
Yeah.
as you go through. And we've got like this really nice voiceover and music and stuff that happens throughout that as well. So it's like
Oh,
super satisfying.
I had no idea. So you do have some voice in there. That's awesome. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
Um, Okay, so now I have a question that is outside my questions here that I completely forgot to put on there. And if you're not allowed to talk about it, feel free to not say so. It's all good. But I'm just wondering, like, so the game is coming out on Netflix games. This is we're really big fans of Netflix games, and this is actually how I learned about the game. So that's how I got really excited about it. So the only questions that I have is how did you guys get that connection? How were you able to communicate with them and get something out of Netflix game? Are they the one that approached you, or did you approach them? Is that something that you can talk about?
Yeah, I'm not sure explicitly how much of that I can talk
Yeah,
about, especially around kind of how those negotiations took
yeah.
place. I can say that I reached out to Netflix originally. So when we started the studio and we came up with the original game idea, the idea was to pitch it to Apple Arcade, and we thought that Apple Arcade was going to be a great fit for the game because they were doing a ton of indie stuff at the
Ah,
time. And then shortly after we'd got the demo together, they changed their entire strategy around before they were funding interesting indie stuff, and then they shifted to like a purely high retention model. So it was a lot of free to play style games. So suddenly they were no longer interested in Paper Trail, and we were like, oh well, we'll just focus on Steam and console, and we'll carry on. But then, yeah, quite late into development, Netflix games kind of piqued our interest, and Yeah, and they seemed really interesting. So I thought I'd reach out. I reached out to quite a few different platforms. That like when Stadia was a thing, I reached out to Stadia,
Oh
Amazon Luna, I
wow.
reached out to Amazon Luna. So I reached out to loads of different potential platform partners. But Netflix seemed like a great fit because they were funding and they were publishing really interesting games. And um, we always wanted to be like making a game that felt like it was published by Annapurna, and Netflix were actually doing some of those titles and Devolver titles and stuff like that. So we're like, that's super cool. Like they're putting together a really interesting portfolio of games. So I reached out to them, and I had to be quite persistent, you could say. And it wasn't until I reached out to them and I badgered them a little bit. I have a tendency to do this. I realized like quite late on into indie development that you have to be a bit pushy with some of these
Yes.
platform holders. Um, so I badgered them a little bit, and they came to see the game at Gamescom. So they were at Gamescom, and we were showcasing the game there. And I think when they were there, they saw someone playing with a mouse and keyboard, and that person that was playing was like, wow, this game would be really good on a touchscreen device. And then it was like a light bulb went off in their head. And then after that, we went on to win a Gamescom award at the official Gamescom award ceremony. We won like best family game, which is obviously a key demographic for Netflix. So ever after that, it was like Netflix were interested, and then we've just had an amazing relationship with them ever since.
That is very cool. Yeah, games. There's a lot of stuff that happened with with Netflix games on Gamescom. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
But that's cool because after you guys got in, they're 100% into it because we've seen in the coming soon trailer, right? They advertise their game, and then in their blog, all of the games that were coming soon, it was
yeah.
advertised in there. So it looks like they're 100% into getting you guys in there. So it's very fun to see, that they're encouraged indie games like you guys to come in, because I know that Netflix game is a lot focused on more popular games and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that. Honestly, I was happy to learn about it, and it is a solid looking game, and very exciting to hear about it. So thanks for explaining that to us. It's good to know. And I do have some developers that I talk to. They wonder how to get into Netflix games, and so I guess you guys can actually get in communication with them yourself, and it's not them that approach you. So it's good information. So thanks for sharing. Um,
Yeah, no worries.
Sidlon has a question for you. He's asking, will there be a gesture or button to reset the paper in the current level?
So you can restart the current level from the pause menu. You can just press pause and then restart level, and that will reset the paper to the position it was in when you first entered it, which basically allows you to do the puzzle from scratch. But the reason that we haven't included like a reset level like button or hotkey directly in the game is because we felt like it made players think that they could get the puzzle into an unsolvable state. Like there are certain puzzle games where you can like push boulders or push crates and stuff, and then the puzzle is broken. So you press, well, not broken, but like you can't solve it. So you press restart and then you try again, and then you press restart and then you try again, and that's like a core part of the game loop. Whereas it really isn't part of the game loop, because the idea that we're designing every single puzzle so that no matter what situation you get it in, you can always undo what you've done, basically, by pulling things around and by unfolding and stuff like that. So whilst you can reset a level, if you're like, oh, it's going to take me a while to get back to where I was, I just want to restart, you can do that from the pause screen. But we didn't want to like push it as like part of the core game loop. And there was another thing as well. There was the undo functionality, which lets you would undo your current move. We felt like that also did the same thing. It made you think like, oh, you'd got stuck. Now I'm going to undo my way out of it. When actually there should not be any need to do that. But we might enable it as a like an accessibility option so that players that do want to undo stuff can if they choose. But yeah, that was like a design decision to make sure that players didn't feel like the game could get put into an unsolvable state.
That is good. That's good to know, though. It's the first time I hear it. So there's no possible way to get stuck in a puzzle. You can always like go
That
back.
shouldn't be.
Okay, yeah, there shouldn't be. I know what you mean. But if we do find something, we'll let you know so you can
Yeah,
fix
yeah,
it.
yeah, for sure.
But that's good. So we're almost at the end of the hour. It's been a fun talk, but I just have one last question for you, and it is: if you were in the same world as Paige Turner, what type of
Yeah.
world would you love to see for yourself?
Yeah, what world would I fold over in order to create like a wormhole in order to travel to a different location? That's a good question. So, like some of the environments that inspired this game. So, this environment was initially inspired by Santorini, which is like a Greek island that me and my brother and my family went to when we were younger on a family holiday, and we had a great time there. So that was like a big point of inspiration. So maybe there, or maybe where somewhere. Maybe like North Korea, because then I could like zip into North Korea and have a quick look around and then zip back out before I got caught. That would be pretty fun.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's awesome. So, there you have it. Maybe we'll see a North Korea
North
world
Korea
in
themed
there.
level.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
They could do that in the DLC.
Yeah, or just like a blend of Mexico and North Korea together. Who you never know, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
But there you have it, guys. It was a very good talk, Henry. Thanks for coming in. I love it. So, this is what I like about these interviews, that I learned so much more about the game, right? Really looking forward to it. There's still a quite a big amount of time we have to wait, but I'll be patient, and we'll be looking forward to play this game, stream it. Tell all over the world how great the game is. So, again, thank you very much, Henry, for coming in. Is there anything you'd like to say before we leave?
So one thing I'd like to say is, yeah, if everyone wants to play the full game before it's released, feel free to join our Discord, and we can get you added to the beta channel. And then, yeah, once we hit the our next beta and alpha milestone, we'll be publishing the full game for people to try out and play on Steam.
That's awesome. You know what? I'm gonna have to go in there. I definitely want to try the beta. That'd be awesome.
Cool.
All right. So thank you very much, everyone in the chat, also, and keep a lookout, because we'll be doing some more iTies interviews. So thanks, everyone, and have yourself a wonderful rest of Friday. Bye, everyone.